Welcome to my review of Qlik since September 2018. I'm Michael Laverick from Catalyst IT Solutions, and I'm going to dive into the updated product to see what new tools we've got at our disposal. Now, looking at the list here of the new features, you might see that it's not quite the big hit release that we've had with the last two. In fact, we've been quite spoilt with the last two releases, with things like the new Insight Advisor and alternative chart suggestions. That said, it does keep up the pace with improving usability and browsability for developers and for end users. Now, rather than discuss these points at large here, I think it's going to be best to jump straight into Qlik Sense and show you the new features in action. So the first new feature is the new default bookmarks. So with your bookmarks before, you could always go into your app overview, to your bookmarks section, and apply a bookmark before you go into your app. However, you may not want to do that every single time that you go into the app. Why not be able to just set a default, and then whenever you go into the app, you know that those selections have already been applied for you. So let's try that. So if I right click onto that, we now have this new section, Set Selections as App Default. Now, sometimes you have to refresh once you've done that. And when we go into the app this time, we should find that our UK sales only has been selected. Let's give that a go. And there we go. Up at the top left, we can see that UK has been selected. And now every time anyone goes into that app, that selection will already have been made for them. Compare that with a published app. If you right click onto the bookmark here, you'll see that you don't have that option. So what it means is that bookmark is going to be applied for every single user. You can't pre-can the selections on a user by user basis, which is a bit unfortunate, but hopefully something that we'll see in a new release. So the next thing that we'll have a look at is the expansion of the Insight Advisor to all users and to published apps. Now, when I say to published apps, we can only use the Insight Advisor against master dimensions and master measures. So if you remember in the previous release, we had the new Insight Advisor and we could query our data in written form. So we could ask for sales by category, for example. And Qlik is going to use its AI engine to come up with a chart suggestion for us, which we can then add to our sheets. Let's compare that with a published app. So we can already see that the list of dimensions and measures has been restricted down to master items. But as long as those are set up, we can use them in the same way. So I can ask for margin by, let's see what we've got, product. So margin by product drill down, and Qlik has suggested this particular bar chart for us, which is actually going to give me everything I want, and I can add that to my sheet. Previously, the Insight Advisor wasn't there at all on published apps. So if your end users have got a professional token or rights to be able to develop their own sheets, then this is going to be a useful tool for them. Another new feature in Qlik since September 2018 is that we can now disable the responsive layer. So what do I mean by the responsive layer? The responsive layer is effectively the Qlik sheet itself, and the fact that when we view the sheet on different devices of different monitor sizes, it will automatically respond and shrink or expand items up accordingly, meaning that we can see everything on the screen without having to scroll about. Now, you can, in Qlik since September 2018, disable that if you want down on your sheet properties, and you can choose a custom sheet size. So this almost takes us back to Qlik View in being able to pick a resolution. So I could go with 800 by 600, and I can see how my sheet is going to respond and what it's going to look like for someone maybe logging in on a tablet or a mobile device. Now, I wouldn't recommend leaving this on when you publish. You want to make the best use of the responsive layer, but it is useful for just checking what your end user is going to be looking at. Now, you might also remember that in the previous release, show hide columns were added to tables. In September, this has been extended to pivot tables, so let's see that in action. Now, I've got a pivot table down here that I'm using as a heat map to see when orders are occurring during the year and on what particular day. I've got month in there, and if I just click on done at the top, I can expand that up and I can have a look at the months. Now, I might want this to behave differently. I might only want the month to show when a particular year has been selected. So I'm going to expand, and then I'm going to go to the month column, and we're going to add a condition to this in the show column if section. And in here, I'm going to say that I only want this column to show when we have selected a year. So I'll use the expression get selected count, and we'll do it on the year field, which I think is part of the order date. There it is. So if the selection count is greater than 0, let's apply that. So at the moment I've got nothing selected, so that column is not going to show. I'm just going to get year. However, if I go and select a year, we now get month appearing. So it's going to give us a bit more flexibility with our pivot tables, and I think over time that'll be expanded into more charts. Okay, I'm just going to clear those selections, and then we'll have a look at another new feature, which is the ability to use gradient and other custom colors on your master items. So over on this side here, I've got a master measure called number of orders, and if we're going to edit this, in previous releases, we only ever had the option to assign a single color to a master item. We could then drag that in, and the bars in this particular chart down here would all go to that color. However, I want the colors to be a bit more dynamic than that, and I can do it using segment colors up here. So if I turn that on, I'm going to leave it as basic, but I don't want to do a percentage. I want to use a fixed value, because what I want to say is that I want any orders or number of orders above 250 to be colored green, and anything below that to be colored red. Okay, let's save that. I'm going to drag that on, and then all we need to do is just update the color settings on here to be by measure. And there we go. So we can see that we only ever had 1 year above 250, which was 2016, using color to make key information stand out. But you can also do this with gradients. So if I jump back to that master measure and edit that again and jump into the segments, let's go with a sequential one. And we can change the boundaries for this, but let's go with something like that. Save. There we go. So we can see that instantly applied to the chart down at the bottom right. And now on to probably the most exciting part of the new release, for me at least, which is the new density layer in maps. So we've seen the mapping capabilities of the base product expand release after release, with more features coming across from the geoanalytics product into the base product. The latest of this is the density layer, or you can also think of it as heat maps. So on the left-hand side, we've got a traditional map with some coloring by country, and then we've got the dots on here to show us revenue by city. That's using a point layer. Now, the problem we've got at a glance there is it's difficult to see what's going on in Europe. There's a lot of dots in a small space. Some of them are overlapping. How can I tell what is really going on? Well, this is where the density layer comes into its own. So over on the right-hand side, I can see quickly at a glance, okay, we've got a lot going on over Northern Europe, a bit going on there over Western America. And as per typical map behavior, we can drill into that. So let's make a selection. Okay, and we can see that a lot of the action there is going on around London, into Belgium and the Netherlands. Okay, so how do we actually build this chart? Well, in edit mode, all we need to do is simply add a new layer. Um, Over on here, you can add a layer and select the density layer. Once that's in, expand your options up, tell it the point that you want to represent, whether it be town, city, area, and so forth. And then the main part for this is the weight and radius. Okay, so weight by is effectively what you want to color or heat this by. In this case, we're using revenue. And then you can also select an influence radius, and you can see that in action if I just drag this around. Let's go up to 80. Let's go up to something like 170. So it's the area of influence around that particular dot on the map that you've selected. My recommendation around this though is to always add your point layer as well. If I take that point layer off and go back to the map, when I try and hover over one of these density layers, I don't get any additional information as you would have with your point. So if I go back into edit and just undo that action, you'll be able to see that having the point layer underneath means that I can hover over and I can still get the information underneath. So use those two combined. The very last thing to mention about the new release are the new connectors. So to Azure SQL database and improved LDAP connectivity, mainly around security and encryption. So I hope you found that useful. There are some other updates worth checking out around the expression editor, being able to link to the Qlik help page from there, and being able to search for functions. Overall, I definitely think there's plenty enough to get your teeth into there, enough to make it definitely worth installing and upgrading. Whilst this particular release might not have brand new shiny charts to wow your end users, it's definitely expanding on the usability of the product, making it quicker for you to build expressions and charts. So have fun with it, and I'll see you at the next release.